Hey everyone, Emily here and welcome to my kitchen. Finally starting to feel a little bit more like spring here in Omaha, and I thought I would start things off by making one of my favorite recipes to make when I have friends in town. This is a really good one to make over the weekend. It's really bright, really fresh, and it has a really spring vibe to it. Lemon raspberry scones. So let's get started and I'll show you how to put this all together. So we'll start things off by combining together all of our dry ingredients, and this is going to begin with 2 cups of flour. So we'll put everything directly into this bowl. So when you measure off your flour, make sure you are leveling it. You have 1 cup. And 2. To that, we'll add in 6 tablespoons of sugar. Give that a mix. And then to that, we're going to go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And once again, make sure when you're doing this that you have level measures. To that, you're going to add in a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and a half a teaspoon of salt. And never measure salt directly over your bowl. In case you over pour, then it's not going to go in the bowl. Once we have our dry ingredients combined together in the bowl, we're going to go ahead and give those a mix. And then we're going to move on to our butter. Now it's very important that the butter is cold, so keep this in the fridge until you're ready to work with it. We're going to need 8 tablespoons of butter for this recipe, and that is a full stick. Go ahead and slice your butter up. If you begin with some smaller pieces, this is going to make the process of combining it all together just a little bit easier. Once you have your butter all sliced up, go ahead and add that directly into your flour mixture. To combine together the flour and the butter, we're going to cut that in with a fork, at least to start. And then we can go in with our hands a little bit later to continue to break this up into some smaller pieces. The goal is to get the texture of this to resemble a very fine sand. So we want to have some pretty coarse crumbs as the end result here. With clean hands, I'm going to go in and break up these butter pieces a little bit more until we get that fine sand texture. Just keep going with this until you get that desired texture, and I'll give you a close-up view of what that looks like when we get there. This is the texture that we want. So fine sand-like texture. We don't have any big clumps of butter in there. So now that we have this fine sand-like texture, we can move on to our flavoring ingredients. So go ahead and give your hands a rinse. You can set that bowl aside, and we're going to get started zesting our lemons. You'll need 2 lemons for this. Make sure they are well washed. We're going to be using the outside of this lemon and the lemon juice to flavor both the scones and the glaze that we're going to add later on. So our first step is to zest the lemons. Now, if you have a zesting tool, that's fantastic. If you don't, but you have a box grater, you'll just use that finer grate to do this. As you're zesting these lemons, be very careful to just get the colored part of the rind off. You want to leave all the white behind. That doesn't have much flavor. It's going to be a little bit bitter. So just take care to only get the yellow part. Now, if you wanted to, you could use a different citrus fruit for this. Orange would be fantastic. We're doing lemon raspberry, but you could do orange and blackberry, orange and blueberry, really whatever you want to do. You'll just switch out the citrus fruits. So get both of these lemons well zested and then set those aside. We're going to be using the juice at a later step. Now that we have these lemons zested, we're going to add a little more than half of this to our dough mixture. Set the rest of this aside and you can add that to the glaze later, or you can sprinkle that on top of the scones for a little bit of a garnish. I don't have an exact measurement for how much lemon zest we're adding in. For me, more is more. I just really like the flavor. Add as much as you like. I like to add a little bit more than half of 2 lemons zested to this. Then you're going to add in the raspberries. So I have about a cup of raspberries washed here. We're going to put those right in. And then just gently stir to combine. You don't have to break up these raspberries much at all. They are going to break up a little bit more when we start adding in our wet ingredients, and you don't want them to get too mushy. So at this stage, just go ahead and leave them whole. Now that we have all of our dry ingredients in here, we're going to get started with the wet ingredients, and there's only 2. Once again, we're going to get this right out of the fridge. It's important that this be very cold. We're going to add in about 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream. As well as about 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm just going to eyeball that. Combine your wet and dry ingredients, just pour that right in there. And then gently mix that up. And you will notice that the raspberries are going to start to break up just a bit as you mix this in. And that's totally fine. You want to get a little bit of raspberry in each bite without making the raspberries totally mushy. This is not going to be a very wet dough. It's still going to have a bit of a crumbly texture. So don't overmix it. That's going to make things a little bit tough in the end. But once you have about this consistency here, you are good to start shaping this and creating your scones. So with clean hands and a clean workspace, you will just lightly dust your countertop with a little bit of flour so that your dough doesn't stick. And then you'll take your scone batter and you're just going to plop it right down on that floured surface. Go in and just shape this into a disc. Again, it's totally fine that your batter is a little bit crumbly. That's a good texture to have. That's going to keep everything very flaky when you bake your scones. Be gentle with it. Once you have your dough shaped into a disc, you'll go ahead and grab a knife and you'll cut this in half, just right across, and we're going to be making this into triangles. You'll cut it in half once again, the other direction, and then you'll cut each of those in half as well. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees and my baking sheet right here. I'm going to grab some parchment paper and cut a piece off just large enough to cover this. That's going to keep everything from sticking, and then we're going to pop that right into the preheated oven. So just gently take each scone and place those on the baking sheet. These don't spread very much, so you don't have to worry about keeping them super far apart. Give them a little bit of distance. There could be some spread in the oven, but they're not going to run together like cookies do. They already smell so good. I can smell the lemon. And these are ready to go into the oven. They'll bake for anywhere between 12 to 16 minutes. Check on them after 12. Make sure they're golden brown, and while these are baking in the oven, we'll get everything cleaned up and get started working on our glaze. The glaze for this is really easy. It's only 2 ingredients. We're going to need powdered sugar and our lemons from earlier. So I'm going to take just about half of my lemon zest, maybe a little bit more than half, reserving a little bit for later for the garnish. And I'm going to put that into a bowl. You'll probably only need one of your lemons for this. We only need about 2 to 3 tablespoons of lemon juice for this. So take your lemons, kind of pick out any seeds that you think are going to come right out, and set one of those aside. I really don't think we're going to need the second one. Then to our bowl, we're going to add in 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. It's okay if it's not exact, spill a little bit in there. We're just going off of consistency here, so we can easily correct for a little bit of an overpour. So take your lemons and just squeeze those directly over the bowl. If you want, you can measure these separately, but I already screwed up the powdered sugar, so again, we're just going for the consistency, and I'll make sure that it's correct before spreading it onto the scones. There we go. That's the consistency that we're looking for. Not super thin and runny, but enough that it's easily spreadable and definitely not very thick. My timer just went off for the scones, so let's see how they're doing. These look perfect and they smell so good. So here they are. We have that nice little golden brown shade to them. You can tell they're going to be super fluffy and flaky. So let's set these aside. Let those cool almost completely before we glaze them. Otherwise, everything's just going to melt right off. And let's finish these up. Our scones are ready to be glazed. They're all cooled off, still slightly warm to the touch, but you just don't want them to be too hot or else the glaze is going to completely melt off. We can take our glaze and just spoon that over our scones. And these are going to be so good. You can see the little bits of lemon zest kind of coming through. It looks so pretty. It's also going to taste really good. Look at these. These are all set and ready to serve. So let's put one on a plate and give it a taste. Looks so good. You can see it's nice and flaky. Came out perfect. Hope you enjoy this recipe. This is one of my favorites to make when I have friends in town. Always a crowd pleaser. Hope to see you back here next time.